Good afternoon, Rumblers. Well, we're 3 seconds away from the afternoon. Now it's afternoon. Good afternoon, Rumblers. How are you doing today? It is a beautiful day outside of our nation's capital here. It's low 80s, balmy. It's a beautiful day. This is producer Tate here, Tate Brown, holding it down for Tim Pool. He is out today, unfortunately. Hopefully we can get him back for next week. He's a little under the weather, but he's doing okay. But we got this. We got this locked down. We got some big news today. Obviously, the big story is Russia. I mean, it's been, I was talking to Serge pre-show. I mean, this special operation started, I was a junior in college, and it's still going, a special operation or whatever. Anyway, Trump and Putin are meeting in Anchorage today. They're going to be hopefully coming to a peace agreement, a peace deal, maybe a ceasefire, something. So we're going to get into that story. That'll be a big story. We also have ICE. They're expanding their operation. They're building new detention centers. We have a story about a detention center in Colorado that's being built. As well as a few days ago, the story broke. They're building a massive detention center in Texas. It would be the biggest in the country. We do have an update on that, so we will get into that. And we will be joined by Brianna Morello later in the day, in 30 minutes. And we'll be discussing a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We will be discussing the D.C. federalization a little more as it's we're seeing how it's playing out. So we got a lot of good stories today. But before we get into it, let's get into our sponsors. First up, we got Boonies. That's right. We got the I wanted to focus on the uncancelable board because this is really cool. I talked about it yesterday. We've been talking about it. It's this is a logo that was used by the independent skate brand for decades. It was an iconic logo. Last 10 years or so, of course, when cancel culture really kicked into overdrive, people started saying, "Oh, this is racist. This is evil." They're saying it's looks like an iron cross or whatever. So people went hard on it. They really shamed people for using this logo. Obviously, if you saw the last election results, cancel culture is really not in vogue anymore. And so Tim picked this up, this logo. Boonies has picked it up, and we now have the uncancelable board. So head over to Boonies, grab you a board. If you're a skater, perfect. If you're not a skater, it could be a good wall ornament. Whatever it is a declaration of war on cancel culture. It's a beautiful thing. So head to shop.boonieshq.com, grab you a board. We also got Cast Brew Coffee. We got all sorts of coffee. Look, I've been working, I've been doing a lot of shows here recently. Energy, you get a little drained. You need a little caffeine. Thank goodness for Cast Brew. There's nothing like it. Little Appalachian Nights down the hatch. You're back in the game. You're locked in. So, head to Cast Brew. Grab you some coffee. We got Appalachian Nights. We got the 1776 Signature Blend, Birthday Blend, 4th of July Special. Look, just take a look. We got all sorts of different. We got the Ian's Graphene Dream. This one's really popular. We were at the live shows these last 3 weekends, and that was a very, very popular blend. So yeah, head to castbrew.com, grab you some coffee. But with that, let's get into our first story from the Associated Press. Trump and Putin will meet at an Alaska military base long used to counter Russia. Let's see, make sure you get my frame right. Tim's got that down, always being in frame. Let's read. In an iconic twist, In an ironic twist, President Donald Trump is set to discuss the war in Ukraine with Russian leader Vladimir Putin at a military base in Alaska that was crucial to countering the Soviet Union during the height of the Cold War and still plays a role today. The meeting is scheduled to take place Friday. Sorry, I was thinking it was Friday. Today's Thursday, so tomorrow. The meeting is scheduled to take place Friday at Joint Base Elmendorf Richardson in Anchorage, according to a White House official who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss internal planning. Here's some more information on the base. Obviously, a lot of the military hardware has been deactivated, but the base still hosts key aircraft squadrons. This is the important bit. I think this is the crux of why they are meeting at a base of all places. The leaders meeting at an American military base allows them to avoid any protests and provides an important level of security. This was from Benjamin Jensen, a senior fellow for defense at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Quote, for President Trump, it's a great way to show American military strength while also isolating the ability of the public or others to intervene with what he probably hopes is a productive dialogue. He said the location means Trump can cultivate ties with Putin while, quote, signaling military power to try to gain that bargaining advantage that makes a second meeting possible. The irony of Putin visiting an American military base that long has and still does aim to counter Russian threats comes as Trump worked to reach a ceasefire deal in a war that he promised during the 2024 campaign to end quickly. So yeah, obviously this is a big it's a big statement to bring Putin here to American tariff. I mean, obviously Alaska is not part of the continental U.S., and obviously it was a former, Russian territory way back in the day. But it does signal that America is negotiating from a position of strength. This is a huge departure from the Biden strategy, which was put yourself on your knees and then negotiate. Obviously, the Afghanistan withdrawal was a good example of why you need to negotiate from a position of strength instead of just pulling the rug out and hoping for the best. And that is, obviously what Trump is doing here. So this is interesting. The rhetoric. There's been some rhetorical shifts in the lead up to this set of discussions. One, Trump, the critique of Trump and the way he handled Putin, especially in the first term, was that he was too soft, that he was too cozying up was the word they used. And that is kind of part of Trump's strategies. He likes to butter up his adversaries a little bit. Obviously, this worked quite well with Kim Jong-un. But Trump has taken a bit of a different stance recently with Putin. Maybe not different, but he's altered his approach a little bit. He's been a bit harder on Putin. And so, anyway, we also see a shift in Putin's rhetoric. This is from NBC News. Putin praises Trump's, quote, energetic and sincere peace efforts ahead of the Alaska summit. We'll read down here. Vladimir Putin sounded positive Thursday on the eve of his talks with President Donald Trump. On the eve of his talks with President Donald Trump in Alaska, saying he believed the American leader was making, quote, quite energetic and sincere efforts towards peace in Ukraine. A day ahead of their summit, Putin convened a meeting of advisors to inform you about how the negotiation process on the Ukraine crisis is going. The Kremlin said this in a readout translated by NBC News. He said, the Trump administration is, quote, making, in my opinion, quite energetic and sincere efforts to stop the fighting, stop the crisis, and reach agreements that are of interest to all parties involved in the conflict. These efforts are intended to create long-term conditions of peace between our countries and in Europe and in the world as a whole. So, I mean, look, Putin's obviously, keen here to get to the negotiating table. I think from his perspective, Russia feels like they are in a let's get in there. They feel like they're strategically in a good position to negotiate. They feel like they have the upper hand right now at this point. We will get into that more. Before we do, let's see what Zelensky's saying. Obviously, there's two parties in this war. Zelensky's was frozen out of these talks. There was when the talk was announced, when they said they will be meeting in Alaska, a lot of people did assume that Zelensky would be invited to join them at the negotiating table. But obviously Trump feels like he can hash this out directly with Putin. It is kind of an America first strategy to bypass the NATO partners who can slow down peace talks and just go directly to Putin to try and negotiate something. We'll read here from NBC News. Zelensky meets with UK's Starmer as Europe braces for Trump-Putin summit. Here's the story. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer welcomed Ukrainian President Volodymyr. Jeez, so many consonants in these names. I mean, what's going on? I see why Ellis Island they'd come in with names like Zelensky. You got like 15 consonants. It's just Johnson now. Your last name's Johnson. I totally get it. Anyway, invited Zelensky to London on Thursday, a day before a critical U.S.-Russia summit in Alaska. Zelensky's trip to the British capital comes a day after he took part in virtual meetings from Berlin with U.S. President Donald Trump and the leaders of several European countries. Those leaders said Trump had assured them that he would make a priority of trying to achieve a ceasefire in Ukraine when he meets with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday in Anchorage. And I think those talks on Friday are scheduled at 3:30 Eastern, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. Both Zelensky and the Europeans have worried that the bilateral U.S.-Russia summit would leave them and their interests sidelined, and that any conclusions reached could favor Moscow and leave Ukraine and Europe's future security in jeopardy, with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine now in its fourth year. So to understand why the Americans and Russians just want to go directly to each other rather than try to negotiate with the NATO allies in Ukraine. It's kind of obvious from Russia's perspective, but from the Americans, I do think there's this fear because Europe kind of put themselves in this position in the first place, like with the dependence on Nord Stream and the Russian energy, and then now with their green energy policies, they've kind of screwed themselves over. So I mean, from Trump's perspective, I think he's kind of just tired of holding their hand through everything. Anyway, so we can see here. This was yesterday. France 24 had this report. Russia makes biggest 24-hour advance in eastern Ukraine ahead of Alaska summit. The Russian army this week made its biggest 24-hour advance into Ukraine in over a year, just days ahead of a meeting between Trump and Putin in Alaska. This was according to data from the Institute for the Study of War. The Russian army took or claimed 110 square kilometers, or 42.5 square miles, on August 12th, compared to the previous day, according to the AFP analysis of battlefield data from the Institute of Study of War. This is the biggest advance since late May 2024. In recent months, Moscow has typically taken 5 or 6 days to progress at such a pace, although Russian advances have accelerated in recent weeks. Russia, which currently has full or partial control of over 19% of Ukrainian territory, said Wednesday that it had taken 2 villages close to Dobrapilla. Donetsk governor Vadim Filashkin said that the region was beginning the mandatory evacuation of families with children from the town of Belozersky and dozen other settlements. We're beginning the mandatory. So anyway, Russia definitely has put their foot on the gas pedal here with this invasion. They're aware. They knew that these ceasefire or peace talks were coming up, and they knew that they needed to have leverage coming into these talks with Trump. Trump, above all else, he's big on chips. Who holds chips? If you remember when Zelensky came to the White House and Trump put him through a struggle session, which was fantastic. The big thing was Trump saying, "You don't have any chips. Like, we have the card. What cards do you have?" And Zelensky's like, "What? We're not playing cards. I don't understand." So Russia realizes this, obviously, and I think this is a big key of why they're making such a monster play here. Pokrovsk, Pokrovsk. That's how you say it. Pokrovsk this has been a big goal for the Russians for about a year now. They launched an assault trying to take Pokrovsk. They were like 10 miles out about a year ago. So this has been key. This is key for the Ukrainian defense. Let's see if I have a map pulled up here. So this is a live map of the lines here in Russia, Ukraine. We can zoom out here. You can see Pokrovsk is here. Pokrovsk, yeah, is right about here. And what happened to all my things? Anyway, there's a massive. Yeah. Real time. This is we do it live. Anyway, Pokrovsk is a very key holding for the Ukrainians. There's a massive highway that runs in and multiple roads that head out. There's trains. It's also that region produces a lot of coal. And the Russian offensive that took place in December, they made massive gains, and it forced the Ukrainians to suspend a lot of exports from the region, and it did a lot of damage for their steel export. It was a really rough situation. Let's see why can't I? This would have been so cool, but I don't know. I don't know what happened here. Here we go. Sorry, I was looking down. Anyway, yeah. So you can see here the M30 runs in. This is a major highway, and Ukraine, they had like 10 years to defend or to fortify against the Russian invasion. So they had this line here that they had heavily fortified, and Pokrovsk is pretty much the last stand in that chain of defended, heavily fortified cities. So this is a really key holding for the Ukrainians. The Russians broke through in the north a few days ago. That's what this story is discussing. We'll read here from France 24. They'll break it down. This is why Pokrovsk is so big for Russia ahead of these discussions. Russian forces on the ground in Ukraine have been closing in on a key territorial grab around the city of Pokrovsk in the eastern Donbass region, which is part of Ukraine's industrial heartland that Putin has long coveted. Military analysts using open source information to monitor the battles have said that Ukraine's ability to fend off these advances could be critical. Losing Pokrovsk would hand Russia an important victory ahead of the summit and could complicate Ukrainian supply lines to the Donetsk region, where the Kremlin has focused the bulk of its military efforts. So yeah, and the way the Russians and their strategy, they use these really small units. It's like 12 to it's like a dozen, maybe 2 dozen two dozen soldiers, and they launched like a bunch of these and broke here in the north, and that's what's kind of given them this sort of bowl around Pokrovsk that's really they're ratcheting up pressure. So let's read here from the FDD's War Journal. This is covering the advance because, like I said, the fact that this is occurring right before peace talks is not a coincidence. We'll read here. Ukraine's first Azov Corps has been tasked with containing Russian advances near the city of Dobra Pia. So you say it's what they say on NPR is Dobra Pia. I listen to NPR, so it's a self-report. I don't take that too seriously. I know it's scandalous, but it is what it is. In eastern Ukraine, the unit announced August 12th, the situation in that area has deteriorated sharply in recent days, raising concern about the stability of Ukraine's defense there. The Ukrainian Pravda confirmed that the Azov Corps forces are now fighting near Dobra Pia. The area was previously under the responsibility of the Pokrovsk Tactical Group, which, as the Ukrainians Pravda military sources say, was completely failing to hold the defense on this section of the front. So even the Ukrainian media is reporting that there's a defensive breakdown occurring in this key region. And there's a lot of analysts out there that are predicting that if Pokrovsk falls, Ukraine's going to be in serious trouble. There's basically, let's go back to the map here. Once this falls, it's basically just a funnel all the way back into the interior of the country. So this is a very key holding. The M30 is a essential highway for Ukraine for resupply and vital for if they want to have any chance of securing the Donbass and Donetsk. So yeah, no coincidence that this is occurring right before peace talks. Putin, this is strategic. But the big part, there we go. The Ukrainians have launched counterattacks, or not counterattacks, but attacks in general. This broke this morning, really early this morning, is in Rostov-on-Don in Russia, southern Russia. There was massive drone attacks. Some people are saying, well, they're targeting civilians. It's so early. It's so hard to tell what's going on over there. We do know that there was an attack on Rostov. It was drone attacks, and we've seen there's been a lot of discussion over the drone attacks. Like, this is modern warfare. This is what it looks like. It's very horrifying. You're just going about your day, and a drone comes in and just completely decimates a building. It's really, really horrifying stuff. But it's the world we live in. The Guardian, this was out 2 days ago. They covered this, talking about the quote, "It's a robot war." We'll see here. I mean, the FPV videos that we're seeing of these drone strikes are absolutely horrifying. This has been discussed ad nauseum, but this is what I wanted to discuss here. Russia's launched a record number of aerial attacks. The Russian military has deployed more than 1,000 aerial bombs and nearly 1,400 kamikaze drones against Ukraine. The current record is 728 drones and 13 missiles sent in a single night in July, most directed at the western city of Lutsk. By autumn, German experts predict Moscow could send 2,000 drones a day. So that's kind of the big one. There's a few different expert analysts that are reporting that Moscow could actually ramp up drone strikes. And so between that and the breakdown on the defensive front from Ukraine, it kind of emphasizes the importance here, if you're the Ukrainians, to negotiate for a deal here. Trump signaled earlier this week that Ukraine may need to concede territory to get out of this alive. I mean, this is no longer, a controlled situation, right? Like, this is breaking down quite rapidly. Some of the things that have been speculated in these peace talks, obviously, is the ceasefire. Something else interesting is there also could be a huge advantage. There could be a huge play for the U.S. here that also benefits Russia, hence the direct negotiation. Is there speculation? That was in the Daily Telegraph, actually, I think news. Yeah, the article talks about it here, so I'll read this. This is from Newsweek. Britain's Daily Telegraph newspaper reported that access to Alaska's natural resources, oil and gas, could be up for discussion when the leaders meet in Anchorage on Friday, as well as rare earth minerals in Ukraine and lifting some sanctions on Russia's aviation sector. So the rare earth minerals, that's been discussed ad nauseum. There's a lot of rare earth deposits in eastern Ukraine, and there's a lot of speculation that a part of these peace talks is going to be Russian access to these deposits. Something else that's interesting, though, and that's been discussed, is these oil the oil talks, because there's a huge strategic play here for the U.S. in undercutting OPEC. We have an opportunity to undercut OPEC here. With some of these some of these oil talks. So we'll get into it. Here's what Newsmax says: the Bering Strait separates Alaska from Russia. Obviously, 3 miles apart. Sarah Palin said she could see it. I don't remember, it was before my time, but apparently she said that. As well as being strategically important because of the melting Arctic ice, sea ice, and expanding shipping routes. It could also be a gateway to considerable undiscovered oil reserves. Alaska's oil and gas exploration leases are concentrated on its north slope facing the Arctic Ocean and in the Pacific facing Cook Inlet, connecting the Gulf of Alaska to Anchorage. In the 1980s, U.S. energy companies drilled into the Bering Sea looking for untapped reserves, but all of those wells had been abandoned, and the area is strictly regulated because of environmental concerns. So there's a lot of speculation that this is the speculation here is that we could offer Russia opportunities to tap into these valuable natural resources in the Bering Strait that would bolster its interest in the Arctic region, which accounted for 80% of Russia's gas production in 2022. So that could potentially be on the table. There could be an energy deal that we could come to an agreement on, which could undercut OPEC, which would also help undercut China. So there's more at stake here than just a ceasefire or peace talks. Russia is kind of keen on getting this across the finish line. Well, first, the EU has this massive sanctions package, the 18th package of sanctions. We could read through all of it, but they have a lot of price caps in here. They have these vessel listings. So if Russia has the shadow fleet, which effectively allows them to make imports and exports and circumvent sanction packages. Here's some estimates here on cargo volume of oil tankers departing Russia by location of beneficial owners HQ. And as you can see here, the amount of shadow fleet exports is ramping up. So the EU, with their sanctions package, they're trying to target these vessels. That's at play. But all this to say is the Russians and the Americans would be keen on coming to some sort of energy agreement because there's massive geopolitical ramifications for that. Also, this is really funny. This is from the BBC. U.S. warns of additional tariffs on India if Trump-Putin peace talks fail. So there's huge implications because if these peace talks fail and there's no energy agreement, which again would be kind of a pipe dream to some degree anyway, countries like India, who have been trading oil with the Russians, would get just smacked because Trump and Besant clearly are not playing around about tariffs. And I don't know how these guys haven't learned their lesson yet. This is from the BBC. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has warned that Washington could increase secondary tariffs on India. Quote, "We've put secondary tariffs on Indians for buying Russian oil, and I could see if things don't go well, the sanctions or secondary tariffs could go up." So we already have this 25% penalty on India, and then the 25% tariffs for buying oil and weapons. So yeah, if these don't go well, all these countries that are doing business with Russia, specifically India, will get hammered. Trump will he'll want to make an example out of someone. It'll probably be India. Again, people may be skeptical on this. They may be saying, "Oh, we don't want these forever wars." Obviously, Biden's support for Ukraine was pretty much there was nothing binding. It was just a blank check. I don't think that's what Trump's doing here. I think Trump has learned lessons from the Biden admin, which is you can't negotiate from a position of weakness. You need to negotiate from a position of strength, and you can't just. Look, in agreement, I'm sick of seeing all this money go to Ukraine, and there's a lot of questions to be asked of what is even the strategic importance of Ukraine. But I think Trump's doing the right thing here. He's making sure that we get the best possible deal that we can out of this. And the way to do that is, you ratchet pressure up. This is how he operates. You maximize pressure on the person you're negotiating with to give you the most leverage possible. So that's what Trump's doing here. He's shoring up our position against Russia in the short term so that we could potentially reach a nice long-term arrangement with Russia. It's a great thing. Just let him cook. Just trust him. Or don't. that's a discussion. We'll see what happens. Anyway, we'll go to the next story. There's a lot there. I don't know how smoothly I got through all of that, but yeah, stay tuned. It's gonna be really interesting watching these talks tomorrow. Like I said, I think it's about 3:30 Eastern is when they're expected to start. Russia has brought like the majority of their cabinet with them. I saw some Russian commentary accounts were not happy that like virtually their entire government is in Anchorage right now, but we'll see how they go. I'm optimistic. I think that there'll be a favorable peace deal coming out of it. It'll probably take a few rounds, but we'll see. Anyway, here's the next story from the Post Millennial. ICE to open new detention center in Colorado as agency ramps up illegal immigration arrests. ICE plans to open up a new detention center in Colorado as the Trump administration ramps up immigration enforcement operations. The new 1,250 bed facility will open in Hudson, about 30 miles north of Denver. The Federal Immigration Agency told Fox 31 that it has run out of room at its current bed processing center in Aurora, resulting in the need for a new facility as ICE agents increase the arrests in the sanctuary state. Right. So, yeah, ICE has been looking to add roughly 1,000 beds in the location of the Denver field office, which operates in both Colorado and Wyoming. ICE has not confirmed its new Hudson location, but U.S. representatives were reportedly told about the matter earlier this week during a site visit with the Aurora facility. So, look, this is the thing. We need more beds. Trump has said before, although, I mean, the goal obviously is mass deportations. That's what was demanded at the RNC. We saw the signs. The priority, obviously, the first, if you really have to get people out, the first people you are going to target is criminals. And, unfortunately for the left, there's a lot of criminals in this country. We need a lot of beds. We're seeing this, and now with this injection of cash from the big, beautiful bill, we can make this happen. So we have this. This was from NBC. You probably may have saw earlier in the week the plans to open a new facility in El Paso or near El Paso at Fort Bliss. This is from NBC. Trump administration hits hurdles as it builds a key immigration detention facility. Later this week, the Trump administration is set to open a sprawling new immigration detention facility at Fort Bliss in Texas that is slated to eventually become the largest in the nation. The opening comes after months of setbacks, including 2 investigations into a possible improper bidding, 2 canceled contracts, and most recently a death on the construction site. The facility, which will open with capacity to hold 1,000 people, is part of a Immigration and Customs Enforcement's moves to more than double the space it has nationwide to detain immigrants as the Trump administration pushes for more arrests and the agency prepares for a historic influx of cash. This was a quote from a ICE official. It's safe to say all ICE field offices are looking for more ICE detention space. Like the, quote, alligator Alcatraz camp that Florida has built to detain immigrants, the facility at Fort Bliss is a temporary soft-sided tent structure. ICE is increasingly leaning towards building that kind of detention space rather than brick-and-mortar facilities. This was a quote from the a former DHS official. You can't build a brick-and-mortar, newly built facility in probably less than 2 years. In order to expand detention capacity, the ICE needs money. And though the Republican Tax and Spending Act, known as the Big Beautiful Bill, provides $45 billion for that purpose, those dollars have not yet started to flow. This was an interesting piece here. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who ICE is under her purview, there's a new guideline at ICE that requires any expenditure over $100,000 be personally approved by her, which may also slow new construction, according to a private prison industry executive. So that's pretty interesting with Kristi Noem. I think there's a downside to that. Obviously, it will possibly slow construction, as this for private prison industry executive points out. But it will cut waste, and ICE is going to need every dollar from that big, beautiful bill to get mass deportations across the finish line. So, yeah. This is going to be great. It's good to see ICE ramping up the number of beds, because that's an indication that we're just getting started. People have been concerned that deportation numbers are a bit low. Obviously, Stephen Miller's tapped into the base. He knows what the base wants, and he knows that the base wants mass deportations. And I think these are encouraging signs. I mean, this facility at Fort Bliss is going to be absolutely massive, and obviously it's very close to the border. So it is clear that Stephen Miller and Kirsty Noem and the team is still very keen on executing on mass deportations. And so the last 2 or 3 shows I've done, I've kind of blackpilled a little bit. I read stuff about Zoomer's not doing well, not matriculating properly. But I want to come here with the white pill. Look, ICE is cooking here. They got some stuff in the works. There's still 3 years of Trump left. Just trust the process. Don't panic. He's got this. Just trust him. So anyway, let's get to this next article. If you are watching on Timcast News, we're going to conclude the segment here at 4 p.m. We will have the interview on the Tim Pool channel, the Culture War channel. So head over there to watch. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next segment.